Who's excited to paint this seagull, which apparently you can't call it a seagull on the North Shore because it's not the sea. It's a sea to me. It's majestic. We are painting a seagull today. Buckle up, buckle up. Grab your supply list at paint333.com to see all the supplies I'm using in today's painting. If you're new to watercolor, if you're new to this channel, if you're new to me, thank you so much for being here. I'm Jess. I teach artists the 333 method for watercolor painting, and I have a whole awesome beginner program on my channel you should check out. The reference photo and tracing for this paint along is listed in the video's description. I am painting on a full-size sheet, 22 by 30, of Arches rough 300-pound paper. The only thing I ended up not being crazy about with this painting was the eye. So before you dive in, I would just suggest maybe even using azo yellow instead of the quinacridone gold that I used to make it more transparent and a little bit brighter. I just feel like it got a little muddled and it lost some of that light. So try azo yellow. Otherwise, I think everything else was really fun, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this painting. As always, we are going to start with the eye. So I'm getting a nice heavy mix of quinacridone gold, and I'm just putting it on my size 6 round brush. And I'm going to put it right on the dry paper just because it's such a small area. I don't think we're going to get a ton of beautiful wateriness happening, so I'm not too worried about painting with water first. And then I am going to just I have a very heavy mix here, so I'm going to just spread it around with some water. And I'm actually going to bring it out into that. He has this like area behind his eye that you can kind of see is almost red. Well, look at that. We're getting some wateriness, beauty happening anyway. Don't ask, don't expect, and you shall receive. So that's it. We're going to let that dry, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing with the beak over here. So I'm going to paint the whole thing with water and then come in with my quinacridone gold. So I'm just painting with water with a different round brush. I like to have a brush that's just for water, kind of handy at all times. So I'm kind of going right to the edges of that whole beak area with a decent amount of water. And then I'm going to come in with the quinacridone and let it just kind of spread everywhere we painted with water. And I very much kind of clustering the color to where it's darkest on the beak, and then letting the pigment flow out from there into the other areas we painted with water. And the cool thing with quinacridone is that it loves to go everywhere. I'm going to come in with some opera pink too, and maybe we can get some pretty orange red happening on the bottom of the beak there. Nice heavy mix. That opera pink down here. And maybe a little bit here too. And then I might come in with a little bit of water. And just make sure I'm getting my color all the way to the edges, because it'll dry, I think, with some cool looking edges, so I don't want to have to repaint the edges. I want to make sure I have room for those. And I might even come in with a little bit more quinacridone. I wanted those darker red areas to be very much orange and not crazy red. I like that though. All in all, that looks like a great first layer for the eye and the beak. Let's do the background. And I don't normally do a lot of backgrounds, but after doing the jumping spider and seeing how cool that background made the spider look, my interest in backgrounds is renewed. And I'm gonna do something similar as we did with the jumping spider, where we had the background kind of in one area. And I'm gonna do it opposite of that and put it in this lower level area and kind of fade it out that way. And I'm doing that because I want to cluster the action down by where this feet rocky ledge area is going to be, instead of making it too even. I love when there's white space. Sometimes I put too much white space in my paintings, but it's so fun. So I'm painting here with water. I'm using my dirty water, mostly so you can kind of see it, hopefully see it with me. And I'm painting the background, so not the bird, but the background. And I also am leaving myself a little bit of a margin, especially on the areas that are going to have fur, like feathers. So less of a margin next to these legs here and next to the rocks, because those are going to be smooth edges. So we can go ahead and just paint right up to them. And more of a margin around the body of the bird here, so that we can maybe get some nice feathery shapes happening. And then I just kind of like let it go abstract as it gets towards the edges of the page. Okay, so you can kind of see where I painted. I was using my 1-inch flat wash brush. I'm going to keep that handy because I'll likely need it again just for plain water. And I'm going to come in with a nice heavy mix of ultramarine, and I'm probably going to put some cobalt in there too and let that kind of mix on the paper. We have, wow, what a pool. What a pool that is. That's intense. We'll let that spread around. I put a lot of water there. We're going to have a lot of time to work with this. All right, let's move. I'm moving the pool of water mostly. This is very wet. I'm going to even maybe bring some water over to these other areas. So basically, I'm just coming in, painting with these colors, these two blues that I have in my palette, and I'm going to try to lighten it as we move this way. And as we go, I can kind of keep manipulating those paths where we painted by coming in with this plain water brush. I love visible brush strokes, and I love kind of having a little bit of texture in my background. So I'll play around with bringing it into the dry paper and letting it, and just kind of seeing what happens when I allow it to just move around like that. And you're gonna also wanna have your grainer brush handy. This is my 3/4 inch filbert, and we left that little bit of a margin. So you can kind of come in and pull that water and that color up to create a rougher, feathery edge where it meets the bottom, the belly of the bird. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and you don't want to go do this everywhere. We're just kind of suggesting some of these feathery shapes. I'm going to come in with my cobalt too. So I am using my brush that already has ultramarine on it. I'm just going into my cobalt well, getting a nice heavy mix of that, and laying that down into the wash so it kind of mixes on the page and creates this really beautiful mix of blues. I'm bringing it up, this whole wash kind of up a little bit more, just because the point of the wash too, other than being gorgeous, is to give the bird an outline right where his white of the body will be, so you can actually kind of see his shape. I'm just dropping in some plain water and just kind of taking a look at the wash as a whole and seeing if there's anything else I want to do before we move on. A lot of splatter, but it'll be very light. I think that looks kind of cool because it's a seagull. So a little bit of sea spray seems to make sense to me. I have this watery kind of green color, so I'm just putting a little bit of that over here too, without overdoing it. It's always hard sometimes to know what's the perfect amount of flourish. I do like this little bit of green over here though. It's kind of cool. A Kleenex can be your best friend for quick rescues. Okay, I really like that. This beak really went to town with this blending that it did. So I'm just going to use a blotted wet brush and try to lift. It's not all the way dry yet, so I might not have a ton of success here. We'll see. I'm going to see if I can kind of lift and distinguish some of the features in the beak. And sometimes dropping in a little bit of water in the area you lifted can push the pigment out further, but it won't make it as precise. But it's a fun little thing to play around with when you're lifting. And then I'm also kind of refining the edge, especially down on this lower beak. It just is a little, it's a little wonky, and I want the beak to look right, like how it should on the gull. So still just using my watery brush for that. Well, it's not watery, I should say. It's just water only, but it is very much a blotted brush. All right, dropped a little bit more water in on the tip of the beak and then kind of in that pink area, and that'll bloom out, kind of look cool. So that's our second layer on the beak, and we'll definitely do another one. I love how this eye dried. I hope you can kind of see that. That looks so cool, right? So we can kind of come in and do our second layer on the eyes. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my size 2, where it's just a small eye, especially that pupil. So I'm going to come in heavy mix and neutral tint on my size 2 round brush. And I don't even have a reflection in this eye, But I don't know, maybe we don't need one. Famous last words. We'll see. Um, it's past the point of return for reflections anyway. I'm gonna put a tiny one in the pupil. We can always fill it in. That's the cool thing, is we can definitely fill it in if we think it looks kind of funky. I want him to have that little angry look. So we'll see if we can achieve that. And then we'll do the outline around the iris too. My cats always lay on my paintings. So they leave their little mementos behind, their little hairy mementos. All right, so I'm going to come around, give this like a full circle outline around the iris. And he's got this kind of cool like little eyelid thing happening. So I'm just trying to see if I can make that look really good. It's just tough. It's such a small area, and yet the stakes are so high, right? It's eyes. All right, I did paint a little water. I'm trying to paint a little water to help this neutral tint move into these other areas that are dark right around the eye in a kind of organic way. And then I can kind of use the size 2 brush too to make these little feathery shapes. I'm going to go ahead and paint a really kind of a thin layer of water around the eye now. And maybe we can get some cool abstract shapes happening too. It's not where I want it to be yet. In my head, I'm having all these doubts. Oh gosh, this whole painting's a wash. It's hard. Sometimes it's not easy. Okay, we're coming in. I want a really heavy mix of that neutral tint. Actually, let's use our, let's have fun with this. I'm going to actually make, go ahead and spread that water out a little bit more. So I'm going to use my flat brush. I want a thinner layer of water, so we're not really making a big wash right here. But a little thin layer of water will be good. And go up to the beak down here. Leave a little bit of some spots of paper, wouldn't be a bad idea. And I'm going to try to leave that little white line under that part of the beak not painted with water if I can. And get some of there and there. I'm just trying to save whites if I think that there's areas that need to be saved. And now what we could do, I have a 1/2 inch flat grainer brush. I'm going to grab my lunar black, nice heavy mix of that lunar black. It's a Daniel Smith color, highly granulating. It's going to be a lot of fun to use in this bird, and it's mostly right here. So let's just see if we can just drop in really, really heavy mix. It's going to be the key here. And I'm kind of just dotting it in. And you kind of have to get the right level of wetness on here too. So trying to like spread it out even with my, that kind of looks cool. Grabbing the pigment and using my flat brush to spread it out. I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab a little heavy mix on my flat brush here, see if I can kind of make this accurate. I feel like we're salvaging the eye a little bit. I'm definitely being too worried, right? It's very early in the game here, and I can still work on that eye quite a bit. I have high hopes for this lunar black. I'm gonna see if we can get there. I'm gonna blot it a little bit more. There we go. That's kind of what I want. I want those grainer brush bristly shapes to come through. That's what I'm looking for mostly. I just needed to blot it a little bit more. Blot it even more. There we go. This is better. Getting a little bit more happy now. I'm gonna just rinse it and blot it in hopes that I can get more of a lighter shade of that lunar black as we move towards the outside of the bird. The outside edges. There we go. That looks good. It's a lot lighter. This might work. Maybe. I'm going to take my size 2 brush. And I think what I'm going to do first is just try to pick up the existing pigment to refine and make some shadow shapes. We wanted an angry look, and a great way to do that is to give it this top shadow. And I'm just kind of softening this black into the gold right along the edges, and cleaning my brush a lot. I don't really want this black to go into the gold more than it should. It's not a perfectly round shape, so I'm trying to get that, emphasize that a little bit better than I did initially. I'm kind of lifting off a little neutral tint too. Again, I'm kind of just adjusting the shape. I think I maybe should have taken a little bit more time on the shape of it, maybe. Softening it in looks kind of cool. I'm going to grab some of my opera pink and put it on the outside here. Maybe we can get some purple when it mixes with that lunar black. So I'm just softening and lifting and manipulating this color we put down. I do like the purple that I made. I love putting a little color right around an eye like this too. Just helps us look at it more. And then maybe we can lift out a little bit of that quinacridone right in the center of the iris and brighten it up. Let's do another layer. I'm going to definitely come back to that eye, but I want to do another layer on the beak. So heavy mix and neutral tint. I'm going to go on my size 2 brush again. I want to have my blotting brush handy too, water only. Let's see, I don't want, maybe not so much a heavy mix. Not crazy. Is that, can I say that? Not crazy. Not a crazy amount. And I'm just gonna distinguish some of the features that we see on the nose, the beak, the nose beak. And I'm gonna grab some opera pink, and I'm gonna kind of use that in the same areas I already painted neutral tint. It's kind of acting like a buffer color, and it's making it a little darker, a little bit more interesting, helping us avoid green, making it more purple, which is pretty. And I'm giving it some of these feathery shapes too. That's in a good place. Let's do, my cat really wants to get out. So I'm trying to appease my little kitten. I'm putting a little opera pink on the bottom. Joel, hold on. And let's grab some ultramarine to darken that up so it's not, I don't know, I don't like that it looks kind of bloody. I mean, I know they eat fish, but we don't need to lean into it so hard. And I kind of painted where I feel like I have hair all over my face from my kitty. I kind of painted where it bloomed, so I emphasize those really pretty edges. So I'm just adding some quinacridone and add some purple and some neutral tint just to define the shape of the beak, give it some color. I think that looks so fun. Doesn't that look good? It's fun to see how just, another layer or whatever can really give it some dimension, because it was looking a little flat, a little odd, lifting and adding color, and just a lot of fun. And I'm just adding some of this feather texture with some neutral tint on my size 2 brush. And if your beak is kind of fuzzy and it just looks not defined enough, I know I feel like I'm having areas where that's happening in mine. You might just need to come back and add some dimension once it's fully dry. That could definitely be the issue. Okay, my little Jojo is happily out of the studio. Let's do the body, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun, kind of like the background. So I'm going to paint. I'm using my dirty water so you can see it. I'm going to paint the bottom of the white part of the body, and I'm going to leave a little margin on the bottom too. And I'm going to do a similar thing where I kind of just feather it up to the top. Okay, that might be enough for now. I'm going to grab my greener brush, mostly as like an extra brush for color. I'm going to lay down a little bit of opera pink. I'm trying to make this nice shadow color down here. and quinacridone gold too. And I know that's gonna take over. Okay. And then my wonderful favorite thing since I discovered it a month ago, some lunar black, and maybe we'll get some pretty purple if those mix together. This is bold, isn't it? We're going for bold today. I want those to mix together a little bit more. And I think it's grainer brush time. Maybe, you know what? Maybe a little blue. Oh, that's probably a lot of blue. Just put a little bit of blue in there. And let's see, let's get some, bring this down. I'm excited to see what that lunar black does. Some fluffy shapes here. It's very wet still, so I'm getting a lot happening. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to grab a little cobalt here. I don't know, you guys. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about all the decisions I've made in this painting so far. We're going to see what happens. I do really like how that lunar black is kind of making the other colors granulate too. That's pretty. I'm just trying to think if his belly is more pink than I was kind of going for. But we have time. That's why we paint with water. We're giving ourselves some time to think about what's happening as it happens. All right, I'm feathering in. I'm pretty happy with this color. I do like these shifts of color happening around here. And I'm kind of feeling at that point where it's like, you know what? If it already feels a little bit like it's gone away from my vision, a little bit more out of control than I anticipated, then let's just lean into it. Let's just see what happens at this point. And then sometimes you really do salvage it and it ends up looking so cool when you let go, when you're like, oh my gosh, this is something's happening here. I'm not sure what it is. Let's just go to town. Let's just lean into it. All right, I'm using my grainer brush, trying to get some feathery action while this dries. So I'm basically just pulling this existing color around on pretty dry grainer brush right now. This is pretty. This is really ending up looking really cool. I'm gonna, yeah, you can still see it. I'm gonna do the tail, I think, while we're down here. And I'm seeing something I want to mention is this ultramarine blue. That little pop looks so good, in my opinion. I think that looks so cool that the trouble we could run into is now putting that somewhere else. So I'm going to try very hard not to. I want people to be like, wow, look at that. Look at this little color shift that's happening. And just kind of be drawn to that area a little bit. I think that'll be a really good little display of restraint that'll serve us well as we move on. Okay, so I just used lunar black here in this little tail shape. That's kind of all it needs. This wing will be darker even than that. Oops, where am I going? I'm going to put some lunar black here too, maybe. I'm going to blot it, see if I can get some Just trying to get these feathery areas while we're here. This is cool. And I think it's really cool because of like granulation. Okay, we're in a cool phase of the drying process where maybe we can get some water resist happening with our brush right now. Get some grainer brush. I'm just using the existing color on the bird, trying to make some shapes. But you know, now that I just said that, I'm gonna just grab a little bit of that black. I'm just kind of grabbing the messy color in my palette here next to the black. And I don't want a grainer brush everywhere. We just need to kind of suggest some of these feathers. And I'm gonna get some water and see if I can get some water resist. And sometimes before I do that, I like to even fan those bristles out even further. We'll see if we can get that. Water resist is tricky. You have to have like the perfect amount of water on your brush, as well as a really perfect dryness level on your painting, and a good amount of pigment on your subject too. It's not always easy, especially really thin lines of water resist. You might not be able to achieve that. I'm trying to practice. I think I needed more water. And it might not be quite dry enough yet either. So not a lot of water resist happening, but I sure love this belly that we made. This is so cool. We could do scraping. That's looking really cool. I just think water resist looks extra cool. I think because it's such a hard technique to achieve that you kind of feel a little advanced. Like you're the real deal artist when you're able to do it. I know I do. I'm like, dang, I'm good at this stuff. And then the next time I try it, it doesn't work. I'm like, whatever. I'm still good at this. Either way, we're trying and we're having fun. This is fun. I like this little scraping. It's definitely not scraping pigment off. It's just kind of making little indentations for the pigment to fall into. But I like it. I like what's happening a lot. So I'm trying to cluster it and just suggest. And I like too with birds, especially to do kind of crisscross scraping. It ends up looking a lot like feathers when you do that. This is cool. I like this color that we are able to achieve. So I'm kind of clustering them around the legs and around this area, and then feathering it up a little bit without going overboard. Because I mostly really like that granulation. I think that's really pretty. All right, I can't help myself. I want to try water resist one more time. I'm going to try not blotting it. I'm just kind of wiped it on the edge of my water cup. And it's definitely depositing water, but it's not really pushing the pigment as much as I'd like. I'm seeing it more though now. Maybe we just needed to let it dry and have a little bit more water on our brush. That's cool. It worked a little bit better. I like that. I think that's plenty of texture for this belly. And I'm going to try a layer of azo yellow on there. I want to see if that brightens it up.
And then I might even come over and do a little bit more, a little heavy mix of quinacridone on that same brush. Heavy mix, not a ton of paint, not a lot on my brush, and maybe kind of go around a little bit, create a little bit of an outline, a gold outline again. I lost it a little bit more than I would have liked to. But I do love that addition of the yellow. I think that was a really good idea.
And it looks darker in my video than on my painting, and I'm happy with that little addition of that yellow. I think that helped a lot. And then the only other thing I could think of is another layer of neutral tint, and oftentimes too, this is a good little tidbit, is when I'm struggling with eyes in general, I find that adding a layer of sharper lines, not soft edges, but hard edged lines to define the shape of the eye can kind of bring it back to life. So while the inside sometimes needs and benefits from the blurrier, softer edges in the reflections or whatever it might be, sometimes it needs a little bit of definition to make it pop. So I'm trying to get the right mix of pigment without too much water on my brush. So heavy mix of pigment, a lot of pigment on there, but not an overly saturated brush. So I'm kind of adjusting the shape of the eye with some hard edges and maybe getting a little bit more of that furry or fluffy, I always say furry, the feathery texture around the eye itself too, to give it some definition. So I'll speed this up, but that's all I'm really doing right now. And I'm kind of doing a little bit around the beak. I feel like we got mostly where we wanted to be on the beak already, but adding some of those sharper edges to define the beak and some illusion of feathers around the beak too. I'm really happy with that. I'm a lot happier than I was before with that eye. Yay! Okay, let's just make our way down the bird to finish it. I'm going to grab my dirty water and outline or paint with water these wing shapes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of paint the tip of the wing shape and feather it up into the rest of the bird. And honestly, I could probably just do this paint because it's kind of a smaller area. But you know me, I love painting with water, all right? And I'm going to do this side of the wing. I'm trying to kind of keep some of these feather shapes that we see separate from each other with the wing area here. So that's why I'm not painting this whole thing. I kind of want some white outlines between these shapes. And maybe leaving a little margin too is not a bad idea. I think that's going to look really cool. A little bit up here too. All right, I'm going to take that same brush and let's see. Let's do ultramarine and our lunar black. So I just realized I love this ultramarine right here. So I'm going to do, I still want ultramarine in it, but I want it to be really heavy on the black. So I'm grabbing both colors. And it's kind of fun. I'm kind of setting it at the bottom and letting it move up those shapes that we painted with water. And I think too, no, I'm going to leave that. I was debating whether or not to put this color on the tail, but The tail is actually white, so I'm not going to do that. Versus these feathers are gray. But how pretty is this mix of those two colors? I just want to facilitate this spread a little bit. So I'm going to come in with pretty wet brush. And sometimes I also just refine the edges of the shapes that I painted with water. And I let them touch and meet and mingle, maybe more so than I originally painted, just because I think it can look kind of cool when they bleed into each other. And it could be nice to, this is just a dry grainer brush. I'm just kind of feathering it in. To this top shape a little bit. Be neat too. I'm actually going to see, I'm going to just grab some of the color from this brush and put it on this brush. Since it's not really living on my palette, I'm going to drop some more in, blot it, because I kind of want to feather this up here a little bit more. Just needed a little bit more color. And I'm kind of feathering it around here too a little bit. I just didn't quite care for how harsh that edge was. All right, I'm going to grab some water and kind of just define this little section that we haven't really finished. So grabbing dirty water. I kind of like dirty water, even if I wasn't doing it just so you could see where I'm painting with water. I think it's kind of neat how it can dry with just the subtlest pigmented edges. And it did this over here. You can't see it. I can't even see it. My water bucket's on it, but it did that in the background wash, which I thought was pretty cool. All right, and right now I'm kind of telling myself just because it's in a reference photo doesn't necessarily mean I have to paint it. Let's see, I'm going to go more heavy on the lunar black and see if I can kind of just dot in some of these pretty little feathery markings this guy has. And I'm kind of going up towards his eye too. And maybe where I'm putting it on the dry paper, I'm going to soften it too. So it doesn't look like little pills right there. And I'm kind of just giving it some shading and glazing now. Definitely got to soften that in. Ooh, that's a lot of water. I'm gonna kind of glaze. Love this blue color. So, oh, you can't even see what I just did. There we go. I just put it right on the dry paper, but we're gonna come in really quickly and soften that in a little bit. So this is just our lunar black, ultramarine blue mix. I'm kind of just giving some depth to the head, some shading there. And then maybe we can come in, if it's not too wet, and do a little bit of those feathery shapes that are so cute. And I'm dropping in a little bit more of that color as it's drying, just to make sure we have the values right. The color is great. Want it to be a little darker. What do we think?
What do you think? I'm in a happier place than I was.
Well, I kind of like some of these. This one makes them look extra frowny. I'm gonna erase that a little bit. But sometimes brush strokes, visible brush strokes, I love flat brushes for that reason. Can look really cool. I'm gonna take this same brush, grab a little water, and glaze with it over on this side of the belly here. Not a ton. I'm gonna want another brush with just water. I just wanted to even out these colors a little bit. And I'm thinking so hard, I can't think of what to say, but I'm trying to basically bring a little bit of congruency to the color palette. It just didn't look like this matched the rest of him quite how I was hoping for. So this just did it, a little glaze of that same color we just used with some visible brush strokes. Always looks really good. Really happy with that. I just love the belly. I think this is my favorite part of the whole painting. I have my little scraper tool. I'm gonna just kind of scrape right over those shapes we made. Now they really look like feathers. Kind of fun. Really fun. Not kind of fun, really fun. I love scraping. I don't know if there's ever a painting I don't scrape in. It'd be hard to find one. My camera cut out, but I did time some scraping to emphasize some feathery shapes on the wings. So that was pretty cool. Let's move on to the legs, and then we'll finish it out with the rock that he's standing on. I'm having him stand on a rock, but you could do what the reference photo is showing us. And I'm going to start again, surprise, surprise. I'm going to paint with water these leg shapes. I'm going to give myself a tiny, tiny margin. Not really for texture, but just because I think it'll look kind of cool. So not a margin everywhere because I kind of went to town with this in some spaces with the background. I'm going to go ahead and paint with water on both of these legs. All right, I tried to avoid the little claws that he has, but I have a pretty decent pool of water on here. I'm going to come in with quinacridone, and I'm excited because I think this will tie in the beak in a great way. That'll make it look a little less disjointed, is probably the right word. And the other cool thing we can do is we don't have to make these legs perfectly even. I'm going to grab, and what I mean by that is maybe I will kind of underpaint this one. More of a suggestive way. I think that can look really cool when you kind of just suggest things instead of actually paint them. So I even lifted some of that out. We're gonna see where this takes us. So opera pink towards the bottom. I'm gonna put opera pink on this one. And then grab some ultramarine because I kind of want this to turn a little purple if we can make it look purple without looking too muddy. And maybe a little bit towards the top too. And then I'm kind of letting it go into this shape. I sure do love that lunar black ultramarine combo. Wondering if I can put it in here a little bit. But I'm also getting green, so can't always get what you want. So I put some more pink. This looks kind of cool. I don't know. I don't always know what's going to happen. I kind of like that. I think the only thing I want to do is maybe lift out this leg a little bit more. There's one of my favorite artists, Carol Carter, and she does this a lot, where she kind of just suggests parts of her painting. And honestly, this is a pretty obvious suggestion. We're not even really suggesting that much. We're not leaving a lot to thought here, but this is kind of cool too because I still love pigmented edges, even when they're very subtle. So I'm hoping we get to see that happen in this leg. A more subtle pigmented edge. And this is how I treat paws and collars when I do pet portraits too. Typically, is I'll paint with water and then drop in color, and then the texture technique that we finish with, step 3 in my process, is this pigmented edge technique where we lift pigment out and then drop in water to push whatever pigment is still in that shape out to the edges. I just love it. So I kind of want to do it here too. So I don't necessarily want to lift a ton of pigment out on this shape, but I would love to push it a little bit towards the edges. So I am kind of scrubbing it off in hopes that maybe it'll move around towards the edges of the shape. I'm going to add a little bit of quinacridone just to the bottom of this foot, just for a little congruency here. Quinacridone loves to spread though, so we'll see. We'll see if it stays where we put it. It might not. So this pigmented edge thing is something too that you kind of have to babysit as it dries. So let's move on to the rock and we'll keep an eye on these legs. So I think this rock is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to just surprise. Actually, maybe instead of painting with water this time, let's try some dry brushing. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that lunar blue ultramarine combo. I'm going to start kind of right where he's standing on it. And I'm leaving a nice white edge mostly because it's wet still. And it would blend together. They would become fast friends. So then I'm just moving my brush very quickly to capture the texture of the paper and make it look like a rock. I'm going to grab, I don't think this is quinacridone in this. I have no idea. I'm kind of hoping for some mud here. So just seeing what happens. And I'm kind of trying to center that color to right where he's standing on the rock. And darker on this side. I don't really know where the light's coming from. That's all a big surprise. All right, what would look good color-wise? I think it needs some purple. I think it needs a little buffer color here. And it's fun too to paint with big brushes. And a lot of artists would, I think, agree with me on that, with that sentiment that it will help you paint faster and looser when you paint with big brushes. So now I'm just kind of emphasizing some rocky shapes with this big brush. I think I want to grab some of that dirty water on my other flat brush and let some watery mixes happen on the rock shape. So I'm just painting kind of some water. It looks really cool. I really like it. All right, I'm gonna grab some of that lunar black, and I'm just using the brush shapes to my advantage here. And I'm also trying to create a nice shadow right underneath the feet. I like that. It almost looks like mossy. And then, of course, there's always a reason to use your palette knife, right? I'm just scraping using the wider edge of my palette knife. And it's a really cool way to make it look like angular rock. And I'm also trying to focus my efforts towards the top and stagger them as they reach the bottom of the page. I want to anchor them to the page, but I still want the viewer to fill in a lot of these details. The other really cool thing I think maybe this could benefit from is some toothbrush. A little bit of toothbrush. Yep. That was a good thing, I think. And we could do more too once it's fully dry. It's just really fun when it goes that fast too. I'm gonna drop in more water. Oops, I'm dropping in quinacridone too. More water on this leg because, like I said, we're kind of babysitting this guy, and I want that pigment to really spread out. The other thing that could look kind of neat is if we let the foot touch the rock sometimes. That's probably good. All right, I want to do a similar thing here and add a little water. And when you do this, you often do have to kind of scrub the pigment because it's already settled in, and I want it to resettle at the edges. So I'm trying to move it towards the edges. It looks so cute. I love it how wobbly, gnarly, lanky they are. We got to add in those claws, but I want this to dry first. I'm going to try seeing if I can just do a little bit of my palette knife for some of these details on like the knee area of the foot. So I'm kind of trying to scrape. I'm kind of bringing the background pigment into the foot here and trying to let it settle into these lines I'm scraping right now. Just to give him some texture on his knees because I think that part is really cute. I don't think it's as successful as I was hoping for, but it is working. So it's kind of cool. I don't know. I kind of like it. We don't need as much background pigment for this foot because there's already quite a bit of pigment in here for to settle into the lines we're scraping out. Oh, that's so fun. Look at that. I'm even bringing some pigment over into this leg. I'm just kind of trying to manipulate the shape of the leg a little bit with my palette knife. I think that kind of worked. I love the little knobby knees. Oh my gosh. Just these little details give it some character. It's so fun. That's all I really want in there. Loving that. I don't know. This almost intentional mud has been positively exciting. if that makes sense, when I'm trying to almost make a mud color. And then that lunar black, I think, is causing it to separate a little bit and distinguishing the colors and almost unmudifying it. I really like how that looks. That looks cool. So this isn't completely dry, but if I give myself a little bit of a margin, we'll have some success here. I'm just going to take straight up neutral tint. You could use your lunar black too, and paint in these really cute little claws. It's really cute. And if it bleeds in a little bit, I don't know, sometimes that makes it look really cool. Otherwise, I am trying to kind of leave a little bit of a margin. And I am using my size 2 brush because this is just a very tiny space. And I'm kind of blending a little bit where they blend it on their own. It's so cute. Joel even left a little memento of his love. What do we think? I don't know what I think yet. A little more splatter right there. I love it. I'm not crazy about the eye. And when you have something in your painting you're not crazy about, that's all you can think about. You just dwell on that part, even though the rest of the painting is amazing. I'm going to take a little bit of the water and almost glaze the wing with the existing pigment on it. There we go. I just kind of wanted to soften that. I really like it. I don't know if I'm at the point of saying I love it. Everything but the eye, I love. But, you know, I'm also looking at the reference photo. I'm not crazy about the eye in the reference photo or the expression. And it's like, well, what was I expecting then? I can't really have magic happen if I can't change the expression. And that's something I always tell my clients is I can't change the expression of your pet on my painting. And that's always the most important part. So I really wanted to paint a seagull because they are such a big part of the North Shore experience, especially on Lake Superior, up in Grand Marais, around Duluth, and just a huge part of my whole experience up there. So I love that. And they are, I mean, honestly, that's kind of what they look like. They kind of look a little angry and they want your fish and your food, and but they're so cool. So I think this one's gonna grow on me. I think I'm gonna like it. I'm just gonna take a step back, maybe fuss with the eye with another layer. I'm not sure that's gonna help me or not. Sign it, wax it up, mount it to the board, and it'll be ready for the show. But I appreciate you hanging in here with me, painting this gull. Either way, right? We learned a lot. I know I did. I really love how our rock turned out. The legs with the wrinkles, this whole area is a really pretty watercolor. So that's it for today. I am so happy you painted with me. Please let me know how it went in the comments, and I will see you in the next video of this series. We are painting a fox. Happy painting! I went back after I finished recording, and I did do like a nice glaze of purple here and around the eye. I put a little quinacridone gold around the eye, another little layer of azo. I made this a little bit more purple instead of red. And then I did another layer of quinacridone here too and put some purple on the bottom. Hold on, Joe, hold on. I'm almost done. Don't step on it, Georgie. No. Georgie. Georgie. Georgie.